Guess what? It's time again for another edition of VoIP and Tel VUC, the VoIP Users Conference. A lot of people help us out at the VUC to produce these things, and Simwood.com is one of those folks we would like to thank, turning developers into telcos with their leading API, Simwood.com. On the hosted PBX end, we've got OnSIP.com. Those folks, Junction Networks, have been around for a long, long time, and I've been with them for many years, personally, our company, and also the VUC PBX. Don't forget about ZipDX.com. David Frankel's also been a long-time member of the community. He contributes a lot, including the fantastic ZipDX.com conference bridge. You've heard of Voxbone.com, and they are responsible for our local rate dial-ins in something like 48 cities. So if you really must use the telephone system, go for Voxbone. Okay, and this is something like VUC 437. We've got Peter Dunkley with us. Welcome back, Peter. It's been days since I've seen you last.
Thanks, Randy.
Terrific to see you. We did a presentation. You folks were in London. You're still in London, I guess, or maybe not. But anyway, you did the presentation at the Google campus. We were just talking about that. It went very well. And that video is also available. It's a different presentation. It's available on the VoIP users channel of YouTube. Peter, I'm going to just let you take the ball and run with it. We've got a great audience today, as always. And we want to hear about WebRTC, the SDK you folks are doing, and the big splash that you are about to make in the world of WebRTC. Take it away.
All right, thanks, Randy. Has that come up?
It is completely visible and perfect.
Okay, so I'm just going to start with a short presentation on just some background on Crocodile and our involvement in WebRTC. So Crocodile was founded in 2010, and the idea was to start a company to develop rich communications products and solutions. The background to this is that our managing director, John Parr, who's been in the telecoms industry since the Plessey, Marconi, Ericsson days in the UK, working in a lot of different companies. He was in Russia working with a company there, and they did a big project, a huge project that involved integrating a lot of components from different people. And so they had a lot of trouble with that integration work. So the idea was to come back to the UK and start up a company that could actually do all of this themselves. So towards the back end of 2010, John came back to the UK and started recruiting people, and that's what happened. So we're based in Whiteley down in Hampshire near Fareham, and in the Google campus in London, and most of the team are very experienced telecoms engineers. There are some people on the team who've been in telecoms since the late 80s, early 90s. Lots of experience in the older telephony stuff like SS7 and ISDN, SMS, MAP. And so this team's been pulled together, and we base pretty much everything we do on open source, and where possible we contribute the stuff back. So this is some pictures of the people in the team. We've got John Parr, who's the managing director, and our chairman, Konstantin, who's based over in Moscow. Then there's myself, the technical director, and Paul Pankhurst, who's the engineering director. And then a series of other engineers who, Gavin, is on the line with us now. And so this is the main Crocodile team. We're quite a small company, but we've all got a fair amount of specialization in different telecoms-related things. So just a bit about WebRTC. We kind of became aware of WebRTC during the second half of 2011 and started following it particularly closely towards the end of 2011. And in sort of early to mid 2012, Chrome became stable enough that you could actually start trying it out and have a reasonable degree of certainty that a demo that you put together one day would work the next. So we did that. And we started prototyping things and demoing things and discussing it with our existing customers towards the middle of 2012.
Warning, your identity is in use by one other participant.
Hold on. Okay, that's over.
Okay, should I continue?
Please do. Sorry about that.
So no, it's okay. So anyway, we started a lot of work on this, and that included doing a lot of work on Kamailio, which is one of the products we use the open source projects we use most heavily and contribute to most heavily, implementing things like SIP over WebSockets for signaling and other such things. And we really did our first public demo in early November at the Rich Communications conference in 2012, which made a little bit of an impact because there had been a number of people talking about doing unified comms, rich comms in the browser, and there was a myth going around the conference that it just wasn't possible or wasn't possible yet. So we went out and demoed something. And it was just basic audio calls, video calls, and instant messaging. But 2 or 3 weeks after that event, we were also then at the WebRTC conference and expo at the end of November in San Francisco, and we demonstrated an enhanced version of that demo which did MSRP, chat and file transfer. And the response that we got and the conversations we had with people there kind of solidified our thinking on what we should be doing with WebRTC, and we started a big internal project after that to produce our product, which we launched earlier this week. So in 2013 so far, I did an updated version of the demo at FOSDEM, and then a further improved version at Chameleon World, and we were at an ITSPA event. And what we kind of decided after the WebRTC conference in November is that there was going to be an awful lot of early adopters and people doing telephony type services with WebRTC, but it was increasingly obvious, and had been before that, but it really solidified it in our minds that the most interesting stuff were going to be where people went beyond traditional telephony. So what we decided to do was take all of the technology that we had used to make that first version of our demo and turn it into an SDK to allow other people who might not know anything about telephony, they might not know anything about a network, to be able to use WebRTC in a very, very easy way, whether it's to do a unified communications client, whether it's to do a fancy click-to-call button, or you can embed it in games, or absolutely anything you want. And we've continued developing our demo application because it's actually very nice to be able to have a single application that uses every single feature of our SDK in one place, so that we have one demonstration that can show the full scope of. I actually expect an awful lot of users will actually just use one aspect or another of the SDK depending on what their specific. So for
Okay, Peter, I've confirmed with other people. The congestion, Ken says, we're having some problem with, ironically, with the audio. And I don't know why, because I'm seeing your slides. Probably because the slides aren't moving. Can we try to figure out what's wrong? Is there maybe an issue with a headset or something? Actually, it didn't sound like packet loss. Oh, now he's gone, actually, so I'm talking to myself. No, he's not gone.
Hello, is that better?
You're here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so
Try to continue. Yeah, sorry for the interruption, but you actually did completely cut off a couple of times.
Okay, so let me just. Can you still hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so in just a couple of days ago, we launched our network.
Uh-oh. Now we're back to not hearing. I don't know what's going on. Oh, he got looks like you got removed somehow, Peter.
Yeah, I'm back. Can we just hang on 1 second? I'm going to see if I can kick people off the network, just in case there's a problem here.
All right, the usual jokes about downloading porn notwithstanding.
It's the problem with the shared network. We can't necessarily control who's on it. Well, I'll keep trying. Let me just get the slides back.
Okay, you're good for now, anyway.
Okay, so anyway, what we did on Wednesday is we launched our SDK and our network, and the network is deployed on Amazon Web Services. And the idea is that this network is there for the WebRTC community to use, and for a lot of use cases, it'll be freely available to them. So on the SDK side, what we've done is we've wrappered a whole bunch of very good JavaScript-based signaling stacks for SIP, XMPP, and MSRP. And the idea is all of these different stacks have different APIs and interfaces, so we wanted to wrapper them in something that's very, very simple so that you don't have to understand what's going on to use this. If you want to do a file transfer, it's 1 or 2 lines of JavaScript. If you want to start an audio session, it's 1 or 2 lines of JavaScript. And within the network, we've got this network which is built of a web service which is accessed over HTTPS, running on Apache Tomcat. We've got a secure WebSocket connection for actual signaling and traffic from the SDK. And we're using Kama-Ilio for an MSRP relay, an edge proxy, and we're using Node XMPP Bosch, which is a XMPP connection manager to get XMPP into the network. And we also have a turn server in there. And then within the network core, we have Kama-Ilio, various things based on MobiSense, eJabberD for XMPP, and JBilling, which allows us to offer billing services, which is an example of one of the things that we will make money off of in the network, where if you have an application developer who wants to charge for his services, we can actually manage that for him as part of the network. And given that billing is something that can be very hard to get right, and there are all sorts of logging that needs to be done, we believe that for a lot of application developers, this is going to be quite a useful thing, because if we're handling the billing and we're handling the signaling and we're handling the resiliency and the scalability, they just have to worry about their user experience and their application. So the idea is that the Crocodile SDK provides an easy-to-use API so that people can develop these applications very, very quickly. And as I say on this slide, the only thing that limits what you can do with it is your imagination. And it interacts with our web service, and it wraps a SIP client and all sorts. There's quite a lot in there. But despite there being quite a lot in there, there's a simple code example here which shows that you basically include our SDK, you create an instance of our top-level object, then you create a media session and you connect it up to a tag on your web page, and that's all that you need to do in order to establish an audio session. There is all sorts of events that you can put in here to handle for catching session progress and ringing and answer and everything else. But if you simply want to say, connect to this guy and hook everything up correctly once he answers the call, that's all that you really need in the code. On the network side, we have this web service, which internally we nickname the hub, and it provides a JSON API for provisioning and management. So what that means is that developers who want to use our SDK can use this web service from their own website to create user accounts, change passwords, enable, disable subscribers. So it allows them to fully integrate WebRTC into their system, because if you need a subscriber account or something else, or if you want even to top somebody up, do a top-up with PayPal, we have an API for that, so you can fully integrate all of this at your end. And all access is over HTTPS, because of course security is very important for these things. Within the network edge part of the network, it's a SIP edge proxy, XMPP connection manager, MSRP relay, and a turn server. And all the traffic for MSRP, XMPP, and SIP goes from the SDK using secure WebSockets. And these WebSocket connections are authenticated, and that includes looking at things like cookie headers, checking that the origin header, the cores, cross-origin routing, whatever it is, security or whatever it is, I can't remember the acronym, but all of those checks are done in order to make sure that people are connecting up correctly. And once traffic comes into the edge proxy and the WebSocket traffic's authenticated, the edge proxy or the edge devices then do some sort of deep inspection of the SIP, XMPP, and whatever messaging that's coming through. And basically, traffic that belongs to a domain that is local to our network gets routed into the network core. And traffic that belongs to a domain that isn't in our network, that we have a peering relationship with, the edge proxies route traffic to them. And what that means is that for our customers, they don't just have to use our domain, which is crocodilertc.net, for their subscribers. Although they're welcome to use that, we can actually host their domain locally. And if you are somebody who's a telephone operator and you've got your own network, well, you can still use our SDK, and we can still receive that WebSocket traffic and make it easier to use and manage it. And in those terms, we end up just like another interconnect as far as they're concerned, where traffic comes in from. And then within the network core, we just have a standard SIP proxy registrar, XMPP server, prepay application server, and a billing server, and we use diameter and all sorts of things in here. And the way that network core is set up is that all traffic coming into it has to come from the network edge. And so pretty much everything we've done in terms of designing this, we've been trying to keep security, scalability, and reliability in mind. So all traffic connecting to the network from outside is over HTTPS and secure WebSockets. In terms of authentication, the MSRP relay and the turn server, which are really used for breaking through NAT problems, they use ephemeral credentials. And what that means is that the SDK logs on to our web service in a secure way and sends in an appropriately encoded username, which includes a time to live expiry for that username. The web service then encrypts that username using a key that it has, and base64 encodes that and sends it back over all this over HTTPS to the JavaScript client. At that point, when the JavaScript client wants to log into the MSRP relay or turn server, it provides that username and that secure password, and the MSRP relay and the turn server both know the shared secret that the other servlet has. And what this means is you don't have to embed any passwords in your application. It also allows us to have anonymous types of call usage for click-to-call buttons where people don't have to log in. The fact that you don't have to log in and provide a username and password, but we can still make using the MSRP relay and the turn server secure, which is really important. You don't want people sucking away our bandwidth or your bandwidth. And to make this all scalable and reliable, it's all on an Amazon AWS multi-AZ deployment. So we're using EC2 servers with an RDS database for storing all of the data, logs, everything else. We're using SES for email coming out of the system, and Route 53 for DNS. The MSRP relays and turn servers are actually going to be deployed in all of the different Amazon data centers around the world, and we're going to use the Route 53 latency optimized routing in order to find which, so that when you use these things, you end up using the best of these servers for you in terms of latency and connection speed, which should give the best possible quality of service. We're using the Elastic Beanstalk for web services, so the hub and everything else is being deployed on that. Now that makes it scalable and manageable. And we have plans to use Elasticache, which is their memcache, and DynamoDB for optimizing the database accesses, which is, as the system grows. And we're logging lots and lots of things to do with CDR, signaling traces, and other things. And an awful lot of that is going to be put into Amazon Redshift, which allows us then to do data warehousing and analysis on that data. And that's very important, because if we've got that historical if the application, if they made a change and it's popular, you'll see an increase in traffic. If you made a change and it's unpopular, you'll see a decrease of traffic, and all those historical statistics will be there. And what's next? Well, John Parr, the MD, and myself will be at the WebRTC conference in Expo, and I'll be talking about signaling there. So if there is anybody who wants to talk to us about this stuff and you're going to be there or you're in that area, just let me know, because we'll be in there across those dates. And I'll also be in New York at DevCon 5 talking to web developers rather than telephony people about this. And so that's the presentation. And I'll just do a very short demo, which I believe we have, where what we've done is we've actually made a short video, because Google Chrome really doesn't allow you to have a Hangout and use WebRTC at the same time at the moment. So this is a demo the guys made. So just what we're going to see here is, you can log in. Once you log in, you've got your network address book that's downloaded from the network. You can also add new contacts using XMPP. As you can see, that contact got added, his presence changed. You can edit the contact to give him a friendlier nickname if you want to. Now that that contact exists, you can make a video call to him, which, because this is Chrome, it's VP8. So this is the video call getting established. Which works quite well. See, they're waving at each other. Very friendly people we have here at Crocodile. You could also make audio calls, I believe. That's going to be on the demo next. Yes, it's going to be an audio call. Coming in the other direction this time. So this would be an audio call, and because it's WebRTC to WebRTC, all of this media is actually encrypted, so it's very secure. And this will be over Opus wideband audio as well. We've got instant messaging and chat, and the most important thing to remember about the instant messaging is that also allows you to do data exchange with a server. That's great for games. Imagine play a poker system where you're using WebRTC and WebGL to actually be able to see the people that you are playing against, and using this kind of data here in order to find out what cards and handle the money side of it. And of course we have file transfer too. So yeah, more chat going on, that kind of thing. There's not much point going on more with it. It's just files being sent backwards and forwards, but it's an interesting enough little demo. And so that's really a very, very quick summary of Crocodile and WebRTC and what we're doing with it. And quite happy to talk any more if anybody wants to talk any more about it.
So, Peter, I think one of the most important things we need to do is to get the information on how people can contact you. Would that be through this website, or do you want to give an address, or how do we?
Well, one of the best ways to contact us is just to go to the website. If you go to www.crocodilertc.net, no hyphens or anything in there. That website's actually under a bit of evolution at the moment, but you should be able to go there. There are also going to be some forums on there that will be set up and activated over the weekend. In the meantime, anybody who wants to contact me can also get hold of me on things like Twitter, which is at @pdunkley, or on my email, peter.dunkley@crocodilercs.com, and that's crocodile-rcs.com. I can't guarantee I'm the right person to answer any questions, but what I can do is make sure that they get through to the right people.
You can relay. Let's find out if anybody... Oh, and I see Mr. Bodie has joined us too. Whitebook is asking where's the developer APIs, but before we get to that, let me just repeat. Anybody who has any questions, especially if you're called in, either on the Hangout or ZipDX, it'll be on you in just a second. And Whitebook, who never calls in, I guess, is asking where's the developer APIs and the Play Cloud.
Okay, well, if you go to www.crocodilertc.net, there's a documentation link at the top of that page, and that will take you to where the API documentation is. It's all exported Javadoc stuff, so it's all available there. In terms of the Play network, the way that this is going to work is you can't quite get access to it yet. Over the next week to 2 weeks, we're going to be uploading all of the code for all of the stuff that we've done, the SDK itself, the patches we've had to make to the various signaling stacks and things onto, and in fact the code for the client, onto various websites like Google Code and GitHub. And it's all open source. And what that means, and the way that the SDK works, it actually is it's already got all of the information for our network encoded into it. So if you download that, it's ready to go, and then start using it, it's ready to go.
Okay. Michael has a question as well, and Michael's dialed in a couple of areas. Go ahead.
I have my usual question. Ooh, a little echo. And that is, it's nice to make everything easy, but when they are we given any control of the audio? That is, can I tell Opus that I really want this to be a full bandwidth call and not just a wide bandwidth call, or?
Not at the moment. You're kind of limited because of the access you get to these things in Chrome right now and the fact that the APIs are changing. So the answer is that all of those capabilities will be in the SDK, but some of it will wait until some of the WebRTC stuff is stabilized.
Thank you.
Good question from Whitebook. What's the license, since you mentioned open source?
Well, because one of the main products we've been using is the JS SIP. When we did our Crocodile MSRP, we used the MIT license for that as well. So that's what we used for that, and we may well be using the same license for the other bits. So it's a very loose, take it, do what you want with it kind of license.
Any other questions from anybody?
Hey, any years old?
Dalek.
Exterminate.
Tim. Tim's obviously coming in through a WebRTC channel of some kind. No, Tim, you have the headphone chip set or whatever problem.
Okay.
So you need to unplug and replug, I guess. But he'll be back. Mr. Bodie, do you have audio?
I have audio. Do you hear me?
We do, and you're in the torture room in the CIA.
But no questions from Mr. Bodie. Whenever he asks a question, it gives me more work. Like about what was it, 4 weeks ago you said, can you do XMPP? So we did.
I was hugely impressed by the speed and skill with which you implemented that.
We decided to drop that in at the last minute and added XMPP to the network in the last month, just before launch.
Yeah, it just makes it just a little bit more useful for those people who...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was always on the roadmap, we just brought it forward.
I'm sorry for that, Peter.
No. Who needs sleep?
Okay, now we have Tim in in an audible format. Tim?
Yeah, that'll teach me to use the Raspberry Pi. Right. No, I was just curious about where you felt different browser support was going. And I mean, I missed the beginning, so you may have already have said this, but.
Okay, well, we are playing around with both Firefox and Chrome, but what we're mainly focusing on Chrome at the moment. We basically had to pick one because they're slightly different. We will support all of the different browsers that support this as soon as it is practical to do so. That's a given, you know. To be honest, a lot of what we're doing, although we talk about this being WebRTC, there's an awful lot of non-WebRTC applications for this SDK as well, because of the ability to do MSRP and XMPP. And those should, and I'm saying should at the moment, should work on virtually anything, because really all that they need is WebSockets to be in place, and a lot of browsers do have that now. So,
did somebody put the URL to the SDK documentation in the IRC channel or somewhere? Because I heard it, but I didn't have a pen at hand. Great, thank you.
Crocodile-RCS.net.
It's crocodile-rcs.com is the main company website. It's rtc.net is the network and SDK website.
Yeah, I misstated that. So it's crocodile-rtc.net, and there's no dash in that, right?
There's no dash in that.
Questions, comments?
Okay, quick question for you, Peter. Not directly, well, I suppose it is related to WebRTC. What is your impression of the WebRTC support within Android, the Android Chrome?
It works as long as you turn on. You've got to go into it and go into Chrome flags and then enable it. But beyond that, it works. The Crocodile Talk demo that we put up more or less works in Chrome, and what I mean on Android, and what I mean by more or less works is that there are some UI funnies because it's not a tablet optimized UI, but actually all of the XMPP, the MSRP, file transfer, making audio calls, making video calls even all work just fine. It's just the UI doesn't really work with a touchscreen on that particular demo. I was pleasantly surprised we didn't have to do anything.
We know that Mozilla for Android is also floating around, and the guy or members of the team who are responsible for that are in London. I just haven't had time to touch base with them yet. So it's beginning to look interesting for WebRTC on mobile devices, which obviously we're reasonably interested in.
And you know, like I've said, all of the JavaScript, we're open sourcing it. It'll be available on things like Google Code and GitHub over the course of the next few weeks. Just as we're tidying up a few bits and pieces, we'll start dribbling out from the start of next week after the bank holiday onwards. And yeah, I mean, you know, it's JavaScript, people can download it, so there's not really any point in trying to keep that top secret anyway, even if we weren't big open source fans.
I have a question for you, Peter. You've spoken so far about how what you're doing is setting up peer-to-peer connections, with the exception of when you need a turn server in the way.
Yep.
Do you have any plans to do any B2B UA type sessions so that you could, for example, use the Crocodile system to create something like Google Hangouts where it can be recorded centrally?
We don't yet have any intention of doing that. If we did do it, it would be a separate network, and what we would do is, in the way I described, that the Edge proxy could decide that this isn't local traffic, it goes off to another network. What we would do is we would set up a second network to do this that had the appropriate media server on it, and we would just farm the traffic out that way. So no immediate plans, but we've talked about that kind of thing. We've said, yeah, at the point we have to do recording, that's not going in the Crocodile RTC core network. We would create a specific application for that, just as if we were one of our own customers almost.
Right.
Still time for more questions if anybody has any. DipDX people? Looking at IRC.
Nothing on IRC?
Nothing related.
I'll have another go. This one's less technical and more sort of about WebRTC itself. So we're all aware that WebRTC is a very, very early technology, and the standards haven't actually been finalized yet. So it's a very bold and brave move to launch something now based on those standards. And I'm sure over the coming months and years, you'll have a lot of work keeping up with them. When do you think, given your almost insider knowledge of this area, when do you think WebRTC will be finalized and will be done, as it were, in version 1?
Well, my belief, based on what I've seen, is that there are two huge things holding up stuff. And the first is whether SDP should be used or not, which is something that's been asked on the ITF on at least 3 occasions now. And I think every time there's been votes, it's come down narrowly on the side of SDP. But the people who are against it care enough to keep bringing it back. And I'm sure that's slowing things up. To my mind, I can see both sides of it, but I would rather have SDP in it finished now than wait another 6 months. For the other one, of course, is this mandatory video, and they basically either need to go for H264 VP8, or they need to decide there's no mandatory video codec and just let the market decide. If that happened, I almost suspect VP8 would end up winning, because there are more Chrome and Firefox browsers together than anybody else, and they're going to use VP8. But I can't tell. I'm not psychic. I think those are going to be the two big things. You know, that seems to me what's holding stuff up. When we were in San Francisco in November, everybody seemed to be quite confident that the first half of this year it would all be done and everything would be fine, and of course that time's just gone shooting by.
Okay, we have a question from Life on IRC, because he claims he has no microphone. Life, you owe me big time.
How unlikely is that?
Yeah, very unlikely. But we know that, because we know that Linux can't do video.
But we can see him. He's in the Hangout.
I know. Anyway, I'll ask a question. He says, "Are there going to be an offering?" Well, get your grammar together, first of all, Life. But
if he's typing this, I'd like to see him mime it out while you're.
Okay, here you go, Life. Ready? We'll put it. Here's Life. I'm going to put him on the big screen. So the question is, are there going to be an offering where a company could independently set up and use this on their own network, e.g. private cloud? Peter?
If you talk to us, we'll be happy to discuss that with you. If you want to take our code and do that, feel free. But if you take it and do it yourself, it'll be open source, and if you've got problems with it, it's going to be a best effort support. So, you know, we may or may not have time, depending on what's going on. But if somebody came to us and asked us to do it, and the commercials were correct, it would be a case-by-case arrangement, but we would, of course, be happy to talk to people about that.
So he says, is so cool, the entire offering is open source.
Our web service isn't open source, which does a lot of the authentication bits and pieces, but it's our Chameleon configuration files aren't open source. But everything that we've done when we've written a new module for another open source project at the moment that's in this network, even if it's something we didn't have to make open source there, we have. As far as the JavaScript stuff goes, yes, we're going to minify it in order to keep the download sizes down, and of course once you've done that it's very hard for people to understand the code, but at the end of the day the code's available, so you know, what's the point of trying to keep that entirely closed? Somebody who really wanted to could download it and use it, and you know, yes, they would then be in breach of license, but it just, you know, it's impractical on that kind of side of things. So.
Okay, Life, I think that answers your question. Anyone else have any questions, comments? He says thank you. Questions or comments? Anybody out there? Don't make me start playing this upright bass you can see in back of me, because you'll be sorry.
I will say, by the way, for anybody trying to set this up themselves, configuring Chameleon to do this kind of stuff is actually quite hard, and that's one of the reasons why we decided to provide the network and things, and that's where our value add on the whole process is. So, you know, it's been pretty complicated. Different kinds of authentication models, all sorts of bits and pieces, all sorts of secret sauce, because there's a lot of magic you can do in Chameleon configuration files with hash tables and all sorts of other bits and pieces that you really need to do to configure this right.
Yeah, Bob says scripting Chameleon is a form of art. We could maybe touch really rapidly on one point, which is that open source is open source, but it's a very common thing to be able to monetize all of the work that you've done by consulting. So I think that's what you folks are doing. I mean, a lot of people are doing that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So if people want to set things up and they need help, that would be the way for them to go, would be to talk to you. And
oh yeah. I mean, there's a huge myth about open source, which is that open source is free. If you look at my Chameleon commit stats and all the bits and pieces that we've had to do, and over the last few weeks, little bug fixes here and there, as I've needed to, as we've been building and testing the network, you know, what you find is that although you don't actually pay to get the open source software, you only really get out of it what you put back in. And if you're wanting to do something slightly unusual, you know, you pay for it in a different way.
Absolutely. Okay, we're going to do one last call for questions or comments on this, or any even related topics, before we turn off the Hangout, because really there's no point in going on and on unless we have interaction here.
I have one, Randy.
I was going to say I heard somebody taking a breath in. Go ahead, Jerry.
Actually, on the, I mean, I know you mentioned that the network is kind of the value add side of life for this whole opportunity. On the AWS front, are those AMIs that you guys are using on EC2 and stuff, are those going to be public or private? Or, and I'm curious, what's the base on those EC2 instances? Running what type of server, what OS?
CentOS 6 point whatever, with the reasonably up-to-date updates applied. That's on the EC2 instances we've set up. Where we're using Elastic Beanstalk, we let Amazon take care of that.
And those AMIs that you've produced are private, or are they going to be public?
To be honest, at the moment, the only AMI that we've produced is the base operating system. And that is just the standard CentOS AMI with a couple of extra RPMs installed. There's not really anything there. It was just to make it easier for us to deploy. At some point, we'll be creating a bunch of other AMIs, but I think we will keep those private. They've got our keys and our passwords and all sorts of other things in the configuration files in them, so we're not going to share those.
How are you guys doing your actual deployments on this stuff? Is it you Chef, Puppet? What kind of DevOps are you guys using? Is it a Jenkins environment?
For the Chameleon stuff, it's hand deployed, but the configuration has been written such that just based on information that's put into the user info part for the server on startup. It does a whole bunch of these curls to get various bits of information back, writes in some configuration files. So the idea is that with the Edge proxy, although that Edge proxy's been hand-built, I'll make an AMI of it at some point, and when we deploy in other data centers, we'll just upload that AMI and drop it on there, and it will magically come up in the right configuration based on the information you provided when you created the instance.
Great.
So that's just the right way to do that particular part of it, you know.
That's it for me.
All right, we need to get some more good questions or comments, folks. Even if it's just related, we have a little time yet.
I saw something about SE Linux. I'll just point out that yeah, we've got SE Linux turned on and enforcing on everything, and that was a bit of a nuisance, but it works.
Be careful out there.
I'm going to ask the question that I always ask, or pretty much always ask, which is, what's your business model behind this? How are you going to actually make money and survive?
Well, there's an awful lot of stuff on this network that isn't entirely free. Like if you decide to use our billing, we'll take a cut. If you're, you know, we can host domains for people. I've got some echo there.
Yeah, we're getting that too. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, but we can host domains for people, but we're not necessarily going to do that for free. I say not necessarily because their particular circumstances may vary, but people will be free to create as many Crocodile RTC.net users as they want. But if you want us to host your domain for you with your branding, that, you know, or if you want to just to treat like an interconnect where we connect to you, and then all of this data mining, data warehousing, once you've got all that data stored, there's a lot of clever stuff you can do with that, both providing services to other people, and there's no you know, and how much data you get access to can be a function of what kind of account you've got. Also, you can do a lot of other analysis on that data and provide very useful anonymous information on usage habits to people, all of which are potentially monetizable. So that's kind of it's all the stuff around the edge that we think there's real value in here.
So have you got a published price list yet?
No. No.
Do we know when it might be coming?
I'm not sure. That's got to be a question for the MD, who's not actually around at the moment. For people who we are treating like interconnect, who we're dealing with as interconnects, where we're farming all the traffic off to them, that's going to be a case-by-case negotiation, I think, at least to start with. For other stuff, I, to be honest, don't know what the price list is.
Okay, anything else?
What's the? I have a question about your turn servers. Is it something homegrown, or is it something that you got off the shelf?
There's a turn server that's available on Google Code, and that's what we're using.
Cool. Thanks.
It's interesting.
That would be the one that's imaginatively titled Turn Server, right?
It's RFC something or other dash turn server, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Google giveth and Google taketh away, right? We may get into a discussion about the relationship between Google Voice, Hangouts, and all of the weird things that are going on at the moment. But before we do that, let's close this out. Thank you, Peter, first of all. Great presentation. And we want to remind people that they can take a look at crocodilertc.net for some information. Your company site is crocodile-rcs.com. Have I got that right?
Yes, and that I'm not sure that actually really mentions any of the stuff about. Sorry, I'm not sure that actually mentions much about the WebRTC stuff yet.
Well, what's it contact you though? I think that's
yes, exactly, yes, and all of our email addresses are very imaginative. Firstname.surname at crocodile-rcs.com.
And let me put in a plug here. You know, obviously, if you're watching this and you got to this point, you're interested enough, get on, if you're on Google+, go to the IP Communications and VoIP community, you can hook up with any of us here. There are 450 or so people on there, including Peter and the company Crocodile RCS. Crocodile RCS. And James is pointing to Gavin. Why are you pointing to Gavin, James? You can talk to James Bodie, which would be worth the trip in itself. IP Communications. Our site is VUC.me. You can get a whole lot of things there. We're going to close out with a little music, and then we're going to come back for a private chat on a lot of other things. If you want to join that, you can talk to us. Go to VUC.me and dial into ZipDX. Let me thank a few people. First of all, thank you, Peter. It's always great to hear from you.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, we're going to... well, look at this. Here's a slide that shows... right, because I forgot to show that in the beginning. That's just the way we do things here, folks.
I'm guessing that's not live.
No, that was...
No routing tables were corrupted during this edition of the VoIP Users Conference. Also, IP, Communications, and VoIP on Google Plus Communities. Thanks for staying. VUC.me is the address on the web. VUC.me/live if you're interested in watching the videos. Very often they're demos, so you would gain by watching them. Our thanks to Simwood, simwood.com, onsip.com, our hosted PBX for the last several years, zipdx.com, the fantastic, full-featured, full-color, wideband SIP conference server, and devoxphone.com for the 48 local rate dial-ins. See you next time.